we've been working with experts for over 15 years now. And when we asked 1,200 of them, how much of their potential value were they providing to their organization? Nobody said more than 40%. Everybody was in the 20 to 40% range, but not one single expert said they were offering or providing more than 40% of their potential value to the business that employed them. Now, think of that. These are people with significant capability and expertise and experience, institutional knowledge, skill, ability in their chosen domain, which could be finance, engineering, AI, machine learning, data sciences, risk, actuarial, pricing, software development. And yet, for whatever reasons, they're being constrained in terms of the value that they are able to offer their organization. So imagine the scale of opportunity that exists to you if you can unlock what these folks are able to bring to the organization in terms of value. I'm Peter Stone, Chief Strategy Officer and Managing Partner here at Sionic, and I want to talk to you today about my experiences of unlocking the value of experts. Now, I found that this has historically been an area of underinvestment by organizations in terms of seeking where opportunities for value realization exist. But that's increasingly less the case, certainly in the international banking arena, where organizations are starting to make investments and they're achieving this unlock, which is enabling experts at all levels to operate horizontally, to impact on strategic and operational decision making, to bring their own expertise to the table in ways that adds multiple sources of value. So let's start by thinking about leadership. Now, the traditional model of leadership sees it as a function of hierarchy. So career development progresses from supervisory levels through managerial levels until ultimately you become senior enough to be classed as a leader. And for that, you get the benefit of going on leadership away days, where you learn about some of the challenges that exist across an organization, where you will look at portfolios of business, technology, and regulatory change programs, and you'll read RAG statuses and all day long, or go on leadership conferences where you'll hear about the financial performance of your division, of the group. You'll maybe hear some investor presentations. You maybe get to hear about some corporate initiatives that are taking place. You'll also get to experience some leadership development programs where you learn the latest cutting edge models on how to develop a strategy in an organization. Now, I think that model is a primary enabler of underperformance across organizations. So technology and data are best exploited, for example, by enterprise-wide thinking. The regulator increasingly demanding joined up solutions in organizations and solutions that span the enterprise. Think about agility. Just about every organization is trying to achieve agility. They're doing it in a top-down way, imposing methodology, process, structure, new roles, new governance frameworks. They don't think about agility through mindset and behavior across the organization. And increasingly people, certainly the emerging generations, are looking for purpose in their role. Just the notion of I'm a manager or not, or a non-managerial contributor or an individual contributor, and my role is to just do, that's kind of losing significance with people. They want purpose and rationale behind the work that they do and behind the contribution that they're expected to make. So this notion of purpose-led organizations is a great kind of outcome at the moment. However, don't ignore the fact that that exists within the organization too. People at all levels looking for purpose. So I like to think about distributed leadership, where leadership is seen as a function of mindset and behavior. And problems and opportunities and solutions and blockers and challenges, they sit everywhere in an organization. They don't just sit at the top. It's not just the domain of the most senior people. Sure, amongst the C-suite, the complexity and the scale increases. perfectly understand that. However, it's the aggregate impact of exploiting opportunities throughout the organization and taking out blockers to success around the organization. It's the aggregate impact of those that differentiates the winners from the losers, or the winners from the also-rans. So how about we try to create an organization in which leadership and mindset and behavior are developed, irrespective of role or level. And leadership, mindset and behavior has three component parts for me. First off, we're developing a culture, an environment, and a capability and a mindset where people choose to be at cause, where they influence and they are controlling events that exist around them. They're not at effect, where what happens to them is a function of other people or a function of circumstance, and they can come up with great explanations as to why something didn't happen. So people putting themselves at cause. When people put themselves at cause, they start to take accountability for results. They take responsibility for actions and decisions, and it's the actions and decisions that drive the results that you can influence. And then thirdly, they look to make a difference. So leadership, mindset and behavior, making a difference, achieving outcomes across your organization, creating new conditions of success. So the expert community in all of their domains are a fundamental part of this distributed network that we could create of leadership, mindset and behavior. So if we can focus in on experts, and we can allow their expertise to flourish, but we can develop alongside it different behaviors, and we can focus them on impact as opposed to just input, then we can start to achieve this unlock that I talk about. So why are experts so significantly underutilized? Why is nobody saying that they're not delivering more than 40%? Well, our research showed that there are two primary motivators to the sort of performance, attitude, and mindset of an expert. Firstly, the complexity of the problem that they're working on. So experts want to work on difficult challenges. They want to work on complex challenges that stretch their expertise, that force them to become even more expert. But they also want to work alongside and with credible, similar experts. Even if it's in different domains, not just in their own particular domain, they want to work alongside experts. And when you can bring together this challenge and support sort of context of complexity of problem, caliber of colleagues, then you can start to achieve higher degrees of motivation. But without that, without those challenge and support dimensions, what you'll often see today is that experts will work in bubbles. They'll work in their own bubble, a kind of one or a two person bubble. Those bubbles will sit within silos and operate within a very limited domain within the organization. So what you end up with is kind of an archipelago of bubbles around an organization with disconnected experts operating just with a very limited domain. They have no career path. So the only way to progress in the organization is through that traditional leadership model, is to take on managerial responsibility, to take on responsibility for more people and for bigger budgets, which is not what motivates the technical expert. The goals that experts tend to focus on in this kind of limited context are self-imposed. They set their own targets. They set their own targets that stretch their own levels of expertise. So their impact is kind of limited in that sense. And they tend to be firefighters. They are given problems, but they're sought for kind of input and thinking. Let the leaders develop the broader solutions and use the experts to provide input. So we need to think differently with experts. It's not just the case of put the expert on a leadership development program. We need to treat them differently. So if we can start to think of the expert as a leader, then we can start to progress some of this unlock that we talk about. So yes, we still want to develop this axis of technical expertise. That is always going to be something that will drive a technical expert. So keep developing their expertise. But add in two other dimensions. The dimension of impact, so their ability to impact around the organization, which we'll talk about that more shortly. So not just achieving their own goals that they've set for themselves, but achieving outcomes and new conditions of success for the broader organization. That's the one dimension. And then the other dimension is to help experts to increase the impact of other people. So how can they apply the expertise for the benefit of others so that they in turn can drive out new outcomes for the organization? So within that context, there's three sort of practical interventions that I've seen organizations make where they're looking to move to a distributed model of leadership and they're looking to develop experts as leaders. Three areas of investment. So one, invest in high performance behaviors. So don't neglect the technical expertise, but look at the behavioral performance and look at some of the areas in which experts typically are underdeveloped. We'll come to that in a second. And secondly, increase the support infrastructure around experts by creating and nurturing networks of relationships and communities of interest. And thirdly, build and implement alternative career paths that are dedicated to the expert, so that sit alongside the traditional supervisory managerial leadership route, alternative career paths that allow experts to achieve senior levels of influence in an organization without sacrificing their technical expertise. So let's just take each of these together. So we have a high performance behavior model that operates around 4 clusters: thinking, engaging, influencing, and achieving. And I'm pretty sure that most organizations out there will have something similar developed by their own internal HR and people and talent functions. What we've found is that the thinking and the achieving cluster are typically well developed. So experts are typically able to gather and to solicit and interpret data and piece that together as information, to think about and model alternative scenarios, to look for insights into that data and those scenarios, and to create solutions out of that data. So very strong on the thinking side, and also strong on the achieving side, turning some of that thinking into results and trying to push into the organization some of their solutions and some of their insights. Now, what we'll see when we think about engaging and influencing is that that is sometimes a real challenge for the experts, but two very strong clusters. And what we see in our model, we'll come to this when we talk about career paths, is that each of these 12 behaviors that sit in the 4 clusters can be exhibited at different levels. So we operate on 5 levels, and the lowest level is where that behavior is being exhibited and it's having negative impact, detrimental impact on the organization. Contrast with the highest level, level 5, in which the exhibition of that behavior is having strategic impact. So you can operate a behavior at different levels. Now, the 2 clusters in the middle, engaging and influencing, are the 2 clusters and the 6 behaviors that we find experts typically lack and are typically underdeveloped in. So, this idea of building relationships, working with other people, establishing trust with other people across the organization, going beyond their bubble, beyond their boundary, and collaborating, not cooperating. So cooperating is, in my view, what happens when people fulfill a responsibility in their job. Collaborating is when they apply some discretionary effort and they choose, not because they have to, but they choose to go and work with others to solve problems or exploit opportunities and bring success and bring results. And this idea of developing people. So again, bringing on others in the organization, developing their ability as experts, and bringing them through so that they too can start to connect with a kind of a broader audience. And the influencing, this is the ability to change the organization and to create some degree of followership, to pitch ideas, to pitch solutions, but to do so from the perspectives of other stakeholders, be they investors, be they C-suite, be they technology, for example. So pitching and influencing and taking people with you in language that goes beyond the technical, which is where the expert feels safe, and being able to help people understand what it is that you're kind of offering or bringing or suggesting or proposing. So 4 behavioral clusters, 2 typically underdeveloped. And what you see is when organizations start to invest in, through development programs, building out those behaviors in experts and doing so with programs that are in themselves led by experts. So again, think back to one of the primary motivators is that people want to be working with experts. So have your programs led by experts in their field. Programs that are pacey, they're experiential, they have case studies and real life scenarios embedded in them. And those case studies, those real life scenarios draw upon organization context that's specific and relevant to your organization. They have a line of sight back to strategy and broader strategic outcomes that the organization's trying to achieve. So when you can build all of that in to the development program and focus it on these kind of behaviors, notwithstanding the other behaviors, so don't neglect those, because it may well be, for example, analysis and solution creation is strong at level 3 and you want to move it to level 4, whereas inspiring and communicating are at level 2 and you want to move them to level 5. So there's a kind of graphic equalizer effect to these behavioral programs. So they can make a huge difference. And then the final piece to the jigsaw is building in self-awareness and EQ. So allowing or enabling or giving the expert the capability to better understand how others perceive them and how they might influence and change that. So self-awareness and EQ, the sort of final piece to this particular jigsaw. So this chart just shows some of the gains that you can achieve in behavioral performance at the individual level, but also at the behavior level. So the chart on the left-hand side shows the behaviors and the increases in strength of that behavior as a result of behavioral development programs and behavioral intervention. The right-hand side just takes an example program and shows the gain by participants in overall behavioral performance. So that the light area is the initial score, the dark area shows the extent of the gain. And you can get at these behavioral gains to score them through, as we do, through observation, observation in case study and scenario, but observation in real life by taking feedback from peers, but also from line managers, and through behavioral event interviewing of the particular individual. So that just shows the level of gain that you can achieve in behavioral performance by an individual through some of these interventions. So if we take the second lever, which is the creating and the nurturing of networks and communities, and we're trying to do a couple of things here. We're building out the support infrastructure for the expert, so they have like-minded, credible peers and colleagues around them, beyond their bubble and beyond their silo. So that's the support infrastructure. But what we're also trying to do is start to connect some of these dots. So if you can imagine you have an individual who's made significant gains in their behavioral performance or behavioral capability and the confidence that then goes with that, and that's sitting alongside their technical development and the growth of their technical expertise, imagine what you could do if you could start to connect these pockets of brilliance now across the organization. So, imagine if you can connect your a reg expert with a mobile app expert, with a customer experience expert, with a machine learning expert. What could they start to create for the organization? What about connecting a reg expert with a marketing expert, with a HR expert? How much of a difference could they make around conduct culture, for example, and influencing the organization beyond policy and procedure, and start to focus on kind of behavior and mindset. So networks and communities, they're related and subtly different. So with networks, we want to be giving experts the confidence and the capability through the behavioral development, for example, to build relationships outside of their bubble, across the organization, and beyond the organization, into other professional bodies, into peers, in maybe even in competitor organizations. We've seen lots of that. So this is about giving them the space and the confidence and the capability and the encouragement to build relationships and build these networks out. And when the extent of the networks and the frequency of contact starts to increase, then what you'll see is that communities start to emerge, communities of interest, and not necessarily communities made up of singular expert types, but experts coming together from multiple domains. And this is where extra investment is required by organizations to provide maybe some infrastructural support or some senior sponsorship to now allow these communities to flourish. And we have seen some really powerful examples of communities that have flourished and have provided support and challenge for experts. And here are some of the things that we've seen. So bringing together a common knowledge base that people can draw upon. So whether that's through research or whether it's through solutions that they have founded or problems that they have solved, that gets deposited, it gets shared, and it builds up a powerful center of knowledge that the whole community can draw upon. Communities that drive professional development, so they drive the development of their own expertise, the technical expertise, that is. And what we've also seen is that if we're looking to build out behavioral development programs, then you can derive a faculty to support that program from within these communities. So the community owning the development of its members. Having incentive models, so models that reward performance, they reward contribution, they reward engagement. So the more that people give to the community, the more they're able to take from the community. And if they get that two-way interaction, that's all part of the infrastructure for driving and unlocking some of the value. So having incentives that reward engagement and contribution from this. Learning reviews. So you'll see frequent learning reviews where subsets of the community will come together and just to kind of have a meta review of what the community is thinking about, what the community is focused on, where there are external opportunities, for example, to derive some new thinking. And peer review and peer support. Again, the expert is motivated by the caliber and the credibility of the people alongside them. So when they do a piece of work, whether it's they produce a white paper, they drive some or create some research, or create a solution, or produce a new mobile application, then having their peers review and support that is really powerful, as opposed to a line manager where the expert is probably going to have a lower level of respect for their input. So you can see some of these attributes where the community has a very clear role and purpose and mandate. It's a single source of stories, of skills, of learning, of review, of practice. It is engaging and it's rewarding too. So the third element, we have the behavioral development programs. We have the investment in networks and communities. The third element is around career paths. So this is providing an alternative to the standard career path where seniority is rewarded by through promotions to and you acquire greater levels of influence and responsibility because of your budgetary and sort of people resources that you're controlling. So the expert career path is something different, and it has a number of key elements to it. So it has levels, so from the developing expert through to the distinguished expert, and you can see the labels in between: developing, expert, enterprise, principal, and distinguished. And at each of those levels, you'll see a technical competence requirement, and you'll also see a behavioral competence requirement. So progression through the career path, it does demand development an expansion of technical expertise, but it also demands development and expansion of behavioral capability. And the balance shifts as you go through the levels. So to progress from, say, principal to distinguished, the behavioral development would outpace the technical expertise, whereas from the developing expert to expert, the technical expertise would outpace the behavioral. And the final element of the career path, which is really where this all comes together, it goes back to the point I made earlier, and this is about impact. So we don't reward and progress experts just because they've developed their technical and behavioral expertise. We reward them and progress them because they've applied that technical and behavioral expertise to have impact on the organization. And that impact, which is evidence-based, is strategic, it's operational, it's organizational, and it's on people. And you're looking for evidence of, for example, at the higher levels where the expert has had direct impact on the performance of the organization, where they've had impact on industry initiatives. They've maybe driven some market shifts, where they have developed other people around them and kind of beneath them through the career path. So pulling people through this career path to build up the broader portfolio of experts within a particular domain and across domains. They've changed the way the organization works, and that might be through the way solutions are designed, the way research is done, the way governance operates. So we're looking for application of behavioral and technical expertise, and that application has to have evidenced impact. And when you pull those components together and embed them in the organization, that's when you can really see experts developing through career paths. Just an example from a US extremely large banking organization who took the notion of engineers incredibly seriously, and some of the ideas we're talking about, and building out an ecosystem, as they called it, which is effectively a kind of network of relationships meets community. And they ended up in a situation where the executive team that ran their largest division from a technology perspective, their business division, the technology support for a large business division that employed tens, 50s, hundreds of thousands of people. 70% of the executive team came up through the expert career path. And that was a very deliberate approach to building a culture where expertise was at the heart of what they do within the technology organization. They identified 4 outcomes, which you can see there, kind of speed, scale, resilience, and people. So they were driven by outcomes. So that was the difference that the expert as a leader set out to make, achieving those difference in those 4 dimensions. And just around the right-hand side, you'll see there some of the elements to that. So the behavioral competencies that were required of engineers were embedded in career paths with promotion criteria that were focused on impact. The engineering executives were ultimately role models because they came through the career path, so they stood as role models. And actually, the most senior person, the C-level individual, was also an engineer by trade. So they had a great passion to sort of sponsor this significant cultural shift in the organization. Building out the engineering communities, recognizing and rewarding contribution, not just through the standard salary increase and bonus, but through other means. So they had a very distinct recognition system. And having a whole series of development programs that built out the engineer as leader from junior level through to senior level. So there was a career path, but also development interventions and development programs that supported people through that path, that career. So what was the consequence? What did this particular organization say they got? And these are very typical claims of value that's been derived when these investments have been made in building out the expert as leader. So the individual productivity, so thinking of the behavioral gains, for example, which is a primary lever for driving up productivity. But as I say, don't neglect developing the technical expertise too. So seeing individual productivity gains from 2x to 10x plus, so some real high levels of performance from individuals. But when you link that with the network interactions, and you start to measure network interaction, and you start to measure network strength, and when you start to measure the community interactions, then what organizations are finding is connecting the individual gains to the network interactions that dramatically increase, and that drives up discretionary effort out of that network. So I made that distinction between collaboration and cooperation. So cooperation is when people come together because they have to, because their job determines that they have a responsibility to the organization. Collaboration is when people choose to come together. They choose to coalesce around a problem or an opportunity, and they're applying some discretionary effort in that. So organizations seeing that happening behaviorally as a function of kind of network interactions and the productivity gains that came from behavioral development in capability and confidence. On the bottom left, so this is a direct quote from a C-level executive who said that we are now seeing that our highest performing expert engineers are staying 3 years longer. So they'd identified that their experts in software and other types of engineering were staying for about 2.2 years on average, so a relatively low tenure for these expert individuals. As a consequence of their investments, they found that they were staying for 3 years longer. So that went up to just under 5.5 years. So that's, you know, retaining expertise, it's retaining institutional knowledge, it's retaining IP, as we'll talk about in a second. And that's not only driving out value into the organization, but it's avoiding, you know, the cost of and time of replacing these people. IP, I just mentioned IP. So, you know, intellectual property through innovations, through solutions, you know, being patented, being sold on, being leveraged across the organization, dramatic increases in IP, not just in terms of the production of it, but also the sharing and the application of it, which again comes back to the power of the network and the power of the community. And then lastly, turning some of that into actual financial contribution. So one organization is now saying they're generating 10 million pounds per annum of incremental value add by investing in behavioral programs and career paths and encouraging the networks and building out the communities. So it's a consistent 10 million pounds per annum of added value that they are identifying and seeing coming through. So just to bring us back to the start, when we asked 1,200 experts after they'd had some intervention from their organization, what level of potential value they were actually adding now, huge shift. So 80% was the minimum quoted. So remember, pre-intervention, nobody said more than 40%. Post-intervention, 80% was the minimum that was being quoted. So dramatic increase in the amount of value that experts were bringing to the organization. In fact, many participants in the study said that they were delivering 100, 150, 200% of the value because they were finding themselves making contributions that they never knew was possible. They kind of didn't realize it. So that was just an interesting take on the data, but dramatic gains in potential value being offered. So just to summarize, if we can collectively reshape our thinking about what leadership is and move from this notion of it's hierarchical and it's a function of seniority, and think about network leadership, think about distributed leadership, think about leadership being a function of mindset and behavior, where people put themselves at cause, they take accountability and responsibility, and they seek to make a difference. So we can create that world. And then we recognize that experts are part of that network, and we can specifically invest in them by developing their high performance behaviors, by building out these networks and giving them some of that support infrastructure and making the connections, and implementing career paths so these folks can develop their career and apply their expertise, behavioral and technical, for the good of the organization and the good of the people around them. If we can make those investments and treat the expert as the leader, then the value will flow. People will flourish and value will flow. Thank you.